Last weekend, my wife, Rachel, said she was heading to her yoga class. Pretty standard for a Saturday morning. She's been on this fitness kick lately. Early morning classes, kale smoothies, the whole 9 yards. I figured it was one of those midlife things, you know? We're both in our mid-40s and staying fit is getting harder. I didn't think twice about it until I ran out to grab some coffee. The yoga studio she goes to is on the same block as my favorite coffee shop, so I parked and decided to swing by, maybe surprise her with a latte. But when I got there, something didn't sit right. Rachel's car wasn't in the lot. At first, I thought maybe she carpooled with a friend. But then I remembered she never mentioned anyone going with her. I shrugged it off and grabbed my coffee. But on the way back to my car, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Two figures were standing near the park across the street. It was Rachel and my twin brother, Derek. They were hugging, but not in a friendly, casual way. It was intimate. His arms were wrapped tightly around her waist, and her hands rested on his chest. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe it was innocent. I mean, it's Derek, my brother. We've always been close, though we've had our differences over the years. But as I watched, she tilted her head up toward him, and he leaned down, their faces so close it made my chest tighten. I didn't stick around to see what happened next. I got in my car and drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? When Rachel got home that afternoon, she acted like nothing was wrong. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her gym bag by the door. "How was your morning?" I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fine. How was yoga?" "Oh, it was great," she said, heading to the kitchen. "We did this new flow today. It was killer." I clenched my fists, the image of her in Derek's arms flashing in my mind. She was lying to me. I knew it, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew something was off. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. While Rachel was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. I know. Snooping isn't exactly the most ethical move. But I needed answers. Her messages didn't show anything suspicious. No text from Derek, no flirty emojis, nothing. But when I checked her call history, I saw his name. He'd called her 4 times in the past week. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. What the hell were they talking about? I put the phone back before she got out of the shower, my mind racing. Was I reading too much into this? Was it possible they were just talking about something harmless? Or was there more to it? That evening, I decided to test the waters. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV, when I casually asked, "Have you talked to Derek lately?" Rachel didn't miss a beat. "Not really," she said, her eyes on the screen. "Why? Why?" "No reason," I said, forcing a smile. "Just wondering." She nodded, and we went back to watching the show. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. The next day, I called Derek. "Hey, man," I said, trying to sound casual. "What's up?" "Not much," he replied. "What about you?" "Just thought I'd check in," I said. "Been busy." He hesitated for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. "Yeah," he said finally. "Work's been nuts." "Why? Have you seen Rachel lately?" I asked, my heart pounding. He paused again, then said, "Not really." "Why?" "No reason," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just curious." Another lie. By the time I hung up, my suspicions were in overdrive. Both Rachel and Derek were lying to me. That night, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. As soon as the kids were in bed, I confronted Rachel. "Where were you yesterday?" I asked, my voice sharp. She looked at me, frowning. "At yoga," she said. "Why?" "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I saw you with Derek." Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, Ethan, are you seriously spying on me now?" "Don't deflect," I said. "What the hell were you doing with Derek?" She sighed, crossing her arms. "We were just talking," she said. "He needed advice about something. That's all." "Advice?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Since when do you and Derek talk about anything?" She glared at me, her tone turning icy. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "He's your brother, Ethan." I was trying to help him. "Help him with what?" I demanded. She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "It's personal," she said finally. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and disbelief. You're lying, I said. No, I'm not, she snapped. Yes, you are, I shot back. And I'm going to find out the truth. She rolled her eyes again, grabbing her purse. I don't have to deal with this, she said. I'm going out. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I sat there in the silence, my mind racing. I didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her lies destroy me. After Rachel stormed out, I sat in the dark living room for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen and heard. I wasn't crazy. She was lying to me. Derek was lying to me. But why? What the hell were they hiding? The only way I'd get answers was if I started digging deeper. The next morning, Rachel acted like nothing had happened. She came downstairs, her hair wet from the shower, and poured herself a cup of coffee. Morning, she said, her tone cheerful, like we hadn't had a blowout argument the night before. I didn't respond. She glanced at me, frowning. What's with the silent treatment? Where were you last night? I asked, my voice cold. She sighed, rolling her eyes. I told you I needed some space. Space, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call running to Derek every time we fight? Her eyes widened, and she slammed her mug down on the counter. Jesus, Ethan, are you still on this? She snapped. Derek and I aren't doing anything wrong. You're paranoid. Paranoid. That word felt like a slap in the face. You know what, Rachel? I said, standing up. You're right. Maybe I am paranoid, but that doesn't change the fact that you're lying to me. She glared at me, her jaw clenched. I'm done talking about this, she said, grabbing her bag. Believe whatever you want. She walked out the door without another word. As soon as she left, I grabbed her laptop. It was locked, of course, but I knew her password. It was our anniversary. She hadn't changed it, probably because she didn't think I'd ever check. When I got in, the first thing I did was check her email. There wasn't much there, just the usual junk mail, some work emails, and a few messages from her friends. But then I found a folder labeled Personal. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. Inside were a series of emails between Rachel and Derek. Most of them seemed innocent enough, talking about family stuff, making plans for the holidays, but one email caught my attention. The subject line read, "Last week." I clicked on it and my stomach dropped. Derek, I can't stop thinking about last week. We need to be more careful. Ethan's been asking questions and I don't want him to suspect anything. Let's talk soon. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't just paranoia. This was real. I took a screenshot of the email, saved it to my phone, and put the laptop back where I found it. Then I called Derek. He answered on the second ring. Ethan, he said, his tone cautious. What's up? I need to see you, I said. Sure, he said hesitantly. What's going on? We'll talk in person, I said. We agreed to meet at a diner near his place. When I got there, he was already sitting at a booth sipping a cup of coffee. Hey man, he said, forcing a smile. What's this about? I slid into the booth across from him, pulling out my phone. Explain this, I said, showing him the screenshot of the email. His face went pale. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice shaky. That doesn't matter, I said coldly. What matters is that you've been sneaking around with my wife. Now tell me the truth, Derek. What the hell is going on? He hesitated, his eyes darting around the diner. Ethan, it's not what you think, he said finally. Don't give me that, I snapped. I saw you with her, Derek. I saw the way you hugged her. And now this email? Don't you dare tell me it's nothing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Okay, he said. Rachel and we've been talking. That's all. She's been going through some stuff, and she needed someone to vent to. Venting? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back? I swear, Ethan, he said, his voice rising. It's nothing like that. She's been stressed out, and she didn't want to dump it all on you. I stared at him, my chest tight with anger. You're lying, I said. No, I'm not, he insisted. Yes, you are, I snapped. And I'm going to find out the truth. I got up and walked out of the diner, leaving Derek sitting there with a guilty look on his face. When I got home, Rachel was waiting for me. Where were you? She asked, her tone accusatory. I could ask you the same thing, I said, brushing past her. Ethan, we need to talk, she said, following me into the living room. Oh, now you want to talk? I said, spinning to face her. After weeks of lying to me? She sighed, crossing her arms. I'm not lying to you. Then explain the email, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the screenshot. Her face went pale, just like Derek's had. Where did you get that? She whispered. That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that you've been sneaking around with Derek. Now tell me the truth, Rachel. What the hell is going on? She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. It's not what you think, she said softly. Then what is it? I demanded. She shook her head, her tears spilling over. I can't tell you, she said. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. You can't tell me? I repeated, my voice breaking. I'm your husband, Rachel. We've been married for 18 years, and you can't tell me what's going on? She didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, I walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was Rachel having an affair with Derek? Or was there something else going on? All I knew was that I wasn't going to stop until I found out the truth. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel in Derek's arms, replaying that moment in the park like a broken record. The email I'd found was seared into my brain. We need to be more careful. The word careful echoed in my head. Careful about what? Careful because they knew what they were doing was wrong? Or was it something else entirely? I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait any longer to get them. The next morning, Rachel was already up when I came downstairs. She was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. The casualness of it all made my blood boil. We need to talk, I said, my voice flat. She looked up, her expression wary. About what? You know what? I said, sitting across from her. I want the truth, Rachel. No more lies. No more excuses. Just tell me what's going on with you and Derek. She sighed, setting her mug down. Ethan, I've already told you. There's nothing going on. You're reading too much into this. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. I'm not stupid, Rachel. I saw the email. I saw the way you looked at him. Just tell me the truth. Her face flushed, but she didn't break eye contact. Fine, she said, her voice sharp. If you want the truth, here it is. Derek and I have been talking about you. That threw me off. Me? I said, frowning. What the hell does that mean? She crossed her arms, her tone turning defensive. You've been so paranoid and controlling lately, Ethan. I needed someone to talk to, and Derek was there for me. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. You're blaming me for this? I snapped. I'm not blaming you, she said, her voice rising. I'm just saying that you've been acting crazy, and I didn't know how to handle it. I clenched my fists, my anger bubbling to the surface. So instead of talking to me, your husband, you run to my brother? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Ethan. Not everything is some big conspiracy. Derek and I are friends. That's it. Friends. The word felt like a cruel joke. You know what, Rachel? I said, standing up. I don't believe you. And until you can be honest with me, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. I grabbed my keys and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't have a plan. I just drove aimlessly, my thoughts spinning in circles. What was I missing? Then it hit me. Rachel had been keeping secrets, but so had Derek. If I wanted answers, I needed to get them from him. I called him again, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Derek, I said when he answered. I need to see you. Now. He hesitated. Ethan, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not asking, I said. Meet me at Mom's house in an hour. Our mom's house had been empty since she passed a few years ago, but Derek and I still had the keys. It was a neutral place, quiet, private, and far away from Rachel. When Derek showed up, he looked nervous, his hands shoved into his pockets. Ethan, he said, his voice cautious. What's this about? I didn't waste any time. Cut the crap, Derek, I said. I know you and Rachel are hiding something. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Ethan, I've already told you. There's nothing going on. Don't lie to me, I snapped. I saw the email. I saw the way she looked at you. Just tell me what's going on. He hesitated, his eyes darting away. It's complicated, he said finally. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising. What the hell does that mean? He looked at me, his expression filled with guilt. It's not what you think, he said softly. For a moment, I thought he might finally tell me the truth. But before he could say anything else, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. Who is it? I demanded. No one, he said quickly, shoving the phone back into his pocket. I grabbed his arm, my anger boiling over. Don't lie to me, Derek. Who is it? He pulled away, his expression shifting to frustration. You're not going to let this go, are you? Not until I get the truth, I said. He sighed, shaking his head. Fine, he said. You want the truth? Rachel and I have been meeting because she's planning something for you. A surprise. A surprise, I said, narrowing my eyes. Yes, he said. She wanted my help planning a trip for your anniversary. That's why we've been talking. I stared at him, my mind racing. Was he telling the truth? And the email? I asked. What about that? She didn't want you to find out about the trip, he said. That's all it was, Ethan. I swear. Something about his tone didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't prove he was lying. Fine, I said finally. But if I find out you're lying, Derek, I swear to God. I'm not lying, he said, cutting me off. When I got home, Rachel was waiting for me. Where were you? She asked, her tone accusatory. I could ask you the same thing, I said. She sighed, crossing her arms. Ethan, we can't keep doing this. Either you trust me, or you don't. Trust. The word felt hollow. I'm trying, I said. But you're not making it easy. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. The silence between us was deafening. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something about Derek's story didn't add up. If they were planning a surprise, why all the secrecy? Why the lies? I wasn't done digging. Not yet. The next morning, Rachel was uncharacteristically cheerful. She hummed while making coffee, smiling as she handed me a cup. Good morning, she said brightly, like our marriage wasn't hanging by a thread. Her behavior didn't feel normal. It felt calculated. I took the coffee and sat down at the table, watching her closely. Morning, I said cautiously. You're in a good mood. She shrugged. It's a beautiful day. Why wouldn't I be? I didn't respond. Instead, I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness matching the churn in my stomach. I'd spent most of the night thinking about what Derek had said about the anniversary surprise. It didn't sit right with me. If they were planning something for me, why the lies? Why the secrecy? After Rachel left for work, I decided to do more digging. Her laptop hadn't yielded much, so I turned my attention to her car. She kept it meticulously clean, which meant anything out of place would stand out. I started with the glove compartment. Inside, I found the usual junk, old insurance papers, a half-empty pack of gum. But there was one thing that caught my eye, a receipt from a boutique hotel 2 towns over. The date on the receipt was 2 weeks ago. I stared at it, my chest tightening. Rachel had told me she was at yoga that night. Another lie. I took a picture of the receipt and put it back exactly where I found it. Then I drove to the hotel. The lobby was small and upscale, with a faint smell of citrus in the air. I approached the front desk, forcing a polite smile. I said, I think I left something in my room a couple of weeks ago, but I can't remember the room number. Can you look it up for me? The receptionist hesitated. I can try, she said. What's the name on the reservation? I froze for a split second, then said, Rachel Green. She typed the name into her computer, her expression unreadable. Yes, she said finally. That reservation was for room 214. Would you like me to check with housekeeping to see if they found anything? No, that's okay, I said quickly. Thanks. Room 214. My mind raced as I walked back to my car. Who had Rachel been meeting there? Was it Derek? Someone else? That evening, I decided to confront her again. When she came home, she acted like everything was fine, as usual. Hey, she said, kissing me on the cheek. How was your day? It was fine, I said, my tone neutral. How was yoga? Her smile faltered slightly. Good, she said, heading to the kitchen. I followed her, leaning against the counter. Funny, I said. I went to that boutique hotel 2 towns over today. She froze, her back to me. What? She asked, her voice tight. You know, I said. The one where you booked room 214 2 weeks ago. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of shock and anger. Why are you snooping through my things, Ethan? She snapped. Why are you lying to me? I shot back. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't falling for it. Who were you with? I demanded. No one, she said quickly. I needed some time to myself, that's all. Time to yourself. I repeated bitterly. At a hotel? You expect me to believe that? She crossed her arms, her tears spilling over. Ethan, you're suffocating me, she said, her voice trembling. I needed space, and I didn't know how to tell you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Suffocating you? I said, my voice rising. Is that what you call asking for the truth? Because all I've gotten from you lately are lies. She didn't respond. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. There was someone else. The next morning, I called Derek again. Ethan, he said, his tone wary. What now? I need you to tell me the truth, I said. All of it. No more lies. I've already told you, he said. Rachel and I. Cut the crap, Derek, I snapped. I found a hotel receipt. She's been sneaking around with someone. And if it's not you, then who the hell is it? He sighed, his frustration evident. Ethan, I don't know what you want me to say, he said. Rachel's been going through a lot lately. Maybe you should try talking to her instead of coming after me. I hung up without another word. Derek wasn't going to give me answers. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. That night, I waited until Rachel was asleep and went through her phone again. This time, I found something new, a series of messages from an unsaved number. Can't wait to see you again. Room 214 is perfect. Same time next week. Ethan doesn't suspect a thing. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. Whoever this was, they were confident they wouldn't get caught. But they were wrong. I took screenshots of the messages, saved them to my phone, and put hers back on the nightstand. I didn't sleep that night. All I could think about was the number. The next morning, I called it from a burner phone I'd bought on the way home from work. Hello, a man's voice answered. I froze, my mind racing. Who is this? I asked. Who's asking, he replied, his tone cautious. I hung up, my heart pounding. The voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Whoever this man was, he was the key to everything. That phone call haunted me all day. The voice on the other end was so familiar, but I couldn't place it. Every time I replayed it in my head, I felt like I was on the edge of figuring it out, only for it to slip away. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just some random stranger. He knew Rachel, and based on the messages I'd found, he knew me too. Rachel came home late that evening. She walked in carrying a grocery bag, her face flushed from the cold. Hey, she said casually, like everything was normal. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots of the messages. Who's this? I asked, holding the screen up. Her face went pale, and the bag slipped from her hands, spilling its contents onto the floor. Where did you get that? She whispered. That doesn't matter, I said coldly. What matters is that you've been sneaking around with someone behind my back. Who is he, Rachel? She hesitated, her eyes darting toward the door like she was considering making a run for it. It's not what you think, she said finally. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been cheating on me. Her tears started almost immediately, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. My stomach dropped. So it's true? I said, my voice trembling. She nodded, her sobs shaking her shoulders. Who is he? I asked again, this time through gritted teeth. She looked up at me, her mascara running down her cheeks. I can't tell you, she said softly. Can't? I repeated bitterly. Or won't? She didn't answer. I stood there, staring at her, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. I trusted you, I said finally, my voice breaking. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't feel sympathy. I felt anger. That night, I packed a bag and left. I couldn't stand to be in the same house as her, not after what I'd just heard. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, my mind racing with questions. Who was the man? How long had this been going on? And why the hell couldn't she tell me the truth? The next day, I went to see Derek. I didn't call ahead this time. I wanted to catch him off guard. When he opened the door, his expression immediately turned to unease. "Ethan," he said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the house. He closed the door and followed me into the living room, his movements slow and deliberate. "What's this about?" he asked, crossing his arms. I turned to face him, my hands clenched into fists. "I know Rachel's been cheating on me," I said, "and I know you're hiding something. So tell me the truth, Derek. Who is she sleeping with?" His face went pale, and he looked away. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly. "Don't lie to me." I snapped. "I'm done playing games. If you don't tell me the truth right now, I'll find out on my own, and I swear to God, you'll regret it." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Ethan," he said finally, his voice trembling. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do," I said, my anger boiling over. "Just tell me, Derek." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine," he said, "but you're not going to like it." My heart pounded as I waited for him to continue. "It's someone you know," he said softly. "Who?" I demanded. He hesitated again, his eyes filled with guilt. "It's—" Before he could finish, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his face went even paler. I grabbed the phone before he could stop me and looked at the message. It was from the same unsaved number I'd seen on Rachel's phone. "We need to talk. Ethan's getting too close." My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. "Is it you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What?" he said, his eyes wide. "Are you the one she's been cheating with?" I demanded, my voice rising. "No," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "Ethan, I swear to God, it's not me." "Then who the hell is it?" I shouted. Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. We both froze, the tension in the room so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Were you expecting someone?" I asked. He shook his head, his face pale. I walked to the door and yanked it open, my heart pounding. Standing on the porch was a man I recognized immediately. It was Coach Brad, the man Rachel had spent months talking about during her yoga classes. "Ethan," he said, his tone cautious. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded. "I think we need to talk," he said, glancing nervously at Derek. The pieces started to fall into place, but I wasn't ready to believe it. "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice cold. He hesitated, then said something that made my blood run cold. "About Rachel." Brad stood on Derek's porch, shifting uncomfortably under my glare. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "We need to talk about Rachel." "What the hell do you know about my wife?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Ethan," he said cautiously, glancing at Derek. "I think we should take this somewhere private." "Private?" My chest burned with anger. "Isnuppa. We're doing this right here, right now. Start talking, Brad." He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine," he said finally, "but you're not going to like what I have to say." "I haven't liked anything about this week," I shot back. "Get to the point." Brad sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Rachel and I have been seeing each other." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. For a moment, I just stared at him, my mind struggling to process what I'd just heard. "You've been sleeping with my wife?" I said, my voice trembling. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low. "But it's not as simple as you think." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Not as simple? You've been screwing my wife behind my back, Brad. How the hell is that not simple?" Derek cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Ethan, maybe we should stay out of this," I snapped, cutting him off. Brad held up his hands. "Look, I'm not trying to excuse what I did," he said. "But there's more to the story. Rachel's been manipulative." "Manipulative?" I repeated bitterly. "Is that what you're calling it now? You think that makes this any better?" He shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. "She told me you were having problems. She made it sound like your marriage was already over." I believed her. I clenched my fists, my anger boiling over. "So that's your excuse? You believed her lies?" "Yes," he said simply. "And I was wrong." I turned to Derek, who was standing silently, his face pale. "And you," I said, my voice cold. "What the hell do you have to do with this?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know about Brad," he admitted, "but I knew she was hiding something. I tried to tell her to stop. Ethan, I swear. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So, you're telling me that both of you knew something was going on, and neither of you thought to tell me? Derek looked away, his guilt written all over his face. Unbelievable, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. My wife is cheating on me, my brother's covering for her, and the guy she's screwing thinks I'm the bad guy. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Ethan, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have believed her. I shouldn't have gotten involved. Your apologies mean nothing, I snapped. You didn't just get involved. You destroyed my marriage. The three of us stood there in tense silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Finally, I turned to Derek. Don't ever contact me again, I said coldly. Ethan, come on. No, I said, cutting him off. You lied to me. You betrayed me. I can't forgive that. I turned to Brad next. And you, I said, my voice filled with venom. If I ever see you near my family again, you'll regret it. He nodded, his face pale. Understood. I walked out without another word, slamming the door behind me. When I got home, Rachel was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She must have sensed that something had changed because she didn't greet me. Who else? I demanded, my voice cold. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. What? Who else have you been sleeping with? I asked, my voice rising. Her face crumpled, and she started to cry. Ethan, please, she sobbed. I made a mistake. A mistake? I barked out a laugh. This isn't a mistake, Rachel. This is a pattern, and I want the truth. All of it. Now. She hesitated, her sobs shaking her shoulders. There's no one else, she said finally, her voice trembling. I didn't believe her. I'm done, I said, my voice steady. I'm filing for divorce. Her eyes widened, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Ethan, please, she begged. We can fix this. No, I said sharply. You can't fix something you've completely destroyed. I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and left the house without looking back. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and difficult conversations with the kids. Jake and Lily were devastated, and explaining the situation without giving them all the messy details was one of the hardest things I've ever done. As for Rachel, she moved in with her sister. Brad left town, and Derek, well, I haven't spoken to him since that day. Now I'm focusing on rebuilding my life.